Okay, that ches al base, very bottom of the page. Omar Rabba said, or Rav, Shochat Tzipoy Me'erev Yamtiv. If you shechted a bird before Yamtiv and you didn't do the Kisei Hadam, which is a requirement, and the question is, we just said before you can do it on Yamtiv. Once you shechter it, you can do it on Yamtiv, but in this case, you shechted it prior to Yamtiv. We say, that's it, for Falun, you got to wait till after, or what? The din is you cannot cover it on Yamtiv because you should have done it before Yamtiv. And the reason that we're worried that you might affect your simcha of Yom Tov, it doesn't, because you're allowed to eat the meat, even though you weren't mechased it up. So therefore, it's your fault. Google eats the Me'erev Yom Tov. What happens if you roll dough? Me'erev Yom Tov, when you make dough, you have to give challah. And on Yom Tov, generally, you're not allowed to give truma mais and all that. But if you bake on Yom Tov itself, you can give challah. Here, the problem is you baked it before Yom Tov, and for whatever reason, you didn't give the challah yet. So he says here, so therefore, Gilgal is about to do it for Yantiv. Mafrish the men chalos of Yantiv. You are permitted to set aside the challah Yantiv. That we do permit you. Kisadam we don't, but giving challah you do. Okay, and then that's what he says. Yeah, even though you're not allowed to give true mice and all that. Since if you would have baked it on Yom Tov, you can give challah on Yom Tov. So even though you baked it before Yom Tov, go ahead and give the challah as well. Says the Gemara further. However, the father Shmuel says that he says that even if Gilgal is a Me'erev Yom Tov, a mafrish men challah be Yom Tov, you only permitted on Yom Tov to give challah for whatever you baked on challah, whatever you baked on Yom Tov, but not something that you could have done before Yom Tov. We're not going to allow you to do this on Yom Tov itself. Because there's no reason to do it. You should have done before Yom Tov when in its right time. Says the Gemara Lema, it would seem from here that Pliga the Shmuel Adabu, that Shmuel argues his own father. Omar Shmuel, what did Shmuel say? Shmuel says that Chalas Chutz La'aretz. Shmuel said that we know that Chala outside the Eretz Yisrael is only midrabanan, and so he says over here, because the mitzvahs Luis Ba'aretz are only Mahatayr and Eretz. This is Midrabanan. So he says, Shmuel says, Chalas Chutz Ba'aretz, Oichel V'Hoich, but it is Midrabanan, you do have to give Challah. So he says, you don't have to give Challah first instant, you can eat, just make sure you leave over enough of a piece that you can give away for Challah. So he says, Chalas Chutz Ba'aretz, Oichel V'Hoich, you continue eating the entire bread and just leave a little bit to give Challah, and you mafresh at the end. But Achakach mafresh, and then you mafresh it. So therefore, what's the reason why you cannot give truma, mice, and all those things on Yom Tov? Because it looks like you're fixing it up. The only way I can eat it is if I give truma first. So I mean, I'll be masakin on Yom Tov, it's tikkun keli. But over here, when it comes to challah, where Shmuel understood it, you're not fixing anything up because you can eat as much as you want and give challah next week as long as you left the piece over. So therefore, according to Shmuel, you would be allowed to give challah on Yom Tov even though you baked it prior to Yom Tov because you're not fixing anything up. Because even if you don't give the challah, you can still continue eating the bread that you prepared before. So therefore, there's no Easter. The whole Easter of giving challah is only rabbanon because it looks like you're fixing up, but you're not. So his father said, you're not allowed to give challah on Yom Tov for Shabbos. And he said you could. Amar says, Rav, Shmuel. Even though Shmuel says that you don't have to give challah straight away, give it later, so you're not fixing it up, isn't he made that she'im korah shame? Once you conferred upon the piece, the name of challah, even though once you call it challah, and that means the Yisrael is not allowed to eat it, it already has the name of truma, and that's also looks like you're fixing it up because the fact is you gave it a name, you called it truma, you made something. Some want to say it actually comes under the laws of Boyer, but the Abneza says that. But the point is, Shmuel's made that once you call it challah, you cannot really do that on then separate it on Yom Tov. So therefore, the same thing over here. He'll agree with his father that you cannot do it on Yom Tov if you're going to confer upon it a name, and that's why there's no machlekes whatsoever. Okay, so everybody agrees. Back to the next Mishnah, we're continuing a number of arguments in Sham and Hill regarding Simchas Yom Tov, how important Simchas Yom Tov is, and what laws we're going to be relaxed in. As a result of that. So the bottom we just said is according to Shmuel, even though you're allowed to continue eating the bread, even though you don't give challah, But if you call it challah, you are calling it a shame, and you're making it asa to Yisraelim, and therefore it looks like you just made something happen. And it comes under the banner of you're not allowed to separate Truma and Ma'aser on Yom Tov. Mishnah. The Shammai says, we're going to learn next Mishnah, we're going to later on that if you're allowed to shech birds, so you're allowed to even go and designate the birds, you're allowed to take the birds, but when can you take the birds on Yom Tov? Only if you prepared it before Yom Tov. As a machlekes Shammai and Hill, according to Shammai, you have to actually take the bird and give it a little tresel, a shake. So therefore, you made a motion that you are going to prepare these birds for Yom Tov, and according to Hill, it's enough to say, I'm going to take 2 birds from that chicken coop over there, and that's enough preparation. Now, after you prepared your birds, they're sitting up there in the chicken coop, and you have a ladder. Now, there's 2 kinds of ladders. There's a specific ladder it's called a ladder of a shevach. The ladder is bent in a certain way so that it fits onto the shevach perfectly. That's called a shevach ladder. And then you have a ladder that you generally use to climb upstairs. Now, there might be a problem. There's one thing to use a shevach ladder. There's another thing using a regular ladder, because people might mistakenly see you bringing the ladder over. They might think that you're not actually going to the shevach, which is lower than the 2nd floor. You're actually planning to climb the 2nd floor and fix the roof, or you're planning to do some kind of repairs. So there's an issue here of maras ayin if you're using an ordinary ladder. And what about a shevach? So we're going to see there's a machlekes Shammai and Hill, and we'll discuss it. At what exactly the machlek is all about. Shammai says, you're not allowed to move a ladder from shevach once you could another shikub. You're not allowed to do that. Why not? Right now, the way we understand it, we're talking about a specific ladder for a shevach. It's called a shevach ladder, and yet Shammai says, you're not allowed to move from one to another, even though all you're doing is taking birds and you're allowed to shech the birds and so Simchas Yom Tov, you're not allowed to. Within the same chicken coop, you want to lower the ladder to a lower, there's a bunch of nests, and each nest had their own window there, and you want to lower it to a lower, box. That you can do. However, Beis says not in all circumstances permitted. So what's going on here? Ami said, the whole machlekes here is, so what's the problem? The problem with a ladder, the problem with using a Torah, the problem with using the ladder is that people might misunderstand what you're trying to do. They might misconstrue that you do, even though it's a shevach ladder, they might think you'd be doing something wrong. They think that you're going to repair your roof. And therefore, it's a question of marasai. So, that's the machlekes. The whole machlekes Rabbi Mishamai holds the whole argument is Rabbi Mishamai says people might misunderstand what you're trying to do, and they'll think you're trying to make repairs on your roof and put some cement on it to make it flat or something or smooth. And in order to make sure the water runs off. And Basil says, I'm not worried that people make that have the misunderstanding. They see it's a specific ladder for that shevach. Everybody will understand they're climbing up to obtain some of the birds. The privacy of your own home that nobody can see. Even in the Shammai holds marasayin, there's no marasayin, nobody can see. Everyone agrees, nobody can see. What's the problem? Says it's not so. Didn't Rabbi Yehuda say name of Rav? That the rule is wherever the rule is as follows: if something's forbidden because appearances, even in the confines of your own home and there's nobody else there, it is forbidden. I remember when margarine came out in the beginning of the late 60s, we were all told by the Rabbanim you have to have the wrapper on the table. Even though you're eating inside your house, there's no one there but yourself, you have to have the wrapper. People should realize it's not butter. So maras ayin is even in your own home. So the Shammai says that so first Reb Chana wanted to say that there's no, everyone agrees that in your house there's no problem. And we're asked, what do you mean? But Rav said if marasayin is an issue, then even inside your own house it's an issue. And Rashi already says you're asking a kasha on one amoida Rav Chana from another amoida Rav. How can you ask such a question? So Rashi says here, very interesting, and Taisha as well says it, another Shayim, that the Rav was the Rabban shel kol bnei hagoyla. Rashi says the Rav was the Rebbe of the entire Golus, except he was not a Rebbe over Shmuel, because Shmuel constantly argues them, and therefore we could ask a question from Rav to another person, to another Amodah. Face's expression in the first white line is Rav Godel Haye B'Doirei, the Rosh Yeshiva Yisrael, not just limited to Goyla. He was the Rosh Yeshiva of Klal Yisrael, Chutz Shmuel. Except we just had before another machlekes in Rav and Shmuel were in Bavel and Rabbi Yechon and Rish Lakish and Yisrael, and they argued quite a bit. The Taisa probably also means in Hagolah. We'll have a Gittin Davov of the Gemara says that when Rav came to Bavel, he changed everything around, brought Torah to Bavel. Anyway, the Gemara continues. Maybe Tanoi. In fact, there's an argument Tanoim as to whether Maras Ayin also applies when no one is around, and therefore, so Rav Chanan doesn't agree with Rav. He follows his other Tan. What's the story? The time you learn, if you're walking in the rain and your coat is all wet and everything else you want it to dry, you can spread it out in the sun, it'll dry by itself. I will like it, I get up and down in public, not for everyone to see. Why? Because they can assume that you washed it and laundered it on Shabbos. So this opinion, the Tanna Kama clearly makes a distinction between the privacy of your home, because you know what happened, and the public. There's no Maras Ayin in the privacy of your home. And Rabbi Loza and Rabbi Shimon, they say there's no difference in privacy of your home or outside. In other words, they hold that Maras Ayin is even inside your own home is Maras Ayin. So Rav follows Rabbi Loza and Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Chanan follows the first Tana. No issue. That's one version of the argument. However, Ikidam is another version. Machlek is the whole Machlek is Dafke B'Shasi Yochid. Everyone agrees that Rabbi Nala. Do people misunderstand what the purpose of the ladder is? But Beis Shammai says that even inside your own home you can't do it, because Maras Ayin is inside your own home as well. And Beis Hillel doesn't agree with that. So Machlek is the Yochid. Beis Shammai holds like Rabbi Yehuda and Rav, and Beis Hillel does not hold like Rabbi Rav. Everyone agrees us because people want to make a mistake. Ask the Gemara, Rav the Omer Beis Shammai. What are you talking about? Rav now, the way you're learning now, Beis Shammai is the one who says that Maras Ayin applies in the privacy of your home. That means the Rav is ruling Beis Shammai. How can that be? Nobody can have a pass from Beis Shammai. So he says, Tanoi. Rav Chanan says, Rav will not learn like I learn. Rav definitely will learn that Beis Hillel holds, if there's Maras Ayin, it's inside your own home. But Rav understood Beis Hillel holds, there's no problem in it. Everyone sees you have a specific ladder, a shavich ladder, you can use it for the shavich. Nobody is going to misconstrue that you're going to make repairs. So there's no Maras Ayin in public or private. So the way Rav understood is like the first way. That Beis Hillel holds that there's no problem in Shusharab either. But Beis Shammai says that people misunderstand. So according to Beis Shammai, not only is it forbidden in Shusharab, it's also forbidden in the Shusayachid. But I'm explaining the Mishnah according to the Tana doesn't agree with it. I'm explaining the Mishnah like Tana Kamu, who says that there's no such thing as Maras Ayin in the privacy of your home. So therefore, I'm going to learn that that's Machlekes of Beis Hillel and Shammai. And Beis Hillel follows that Tana that there is no Maras Ayin in the privacy of home. So Rab understands the Mishnah differently. Time we learn Sheitchem B'cham looking at people and Abel Shimon. Says the Gemara Maslisi the Loike Haitan our Mishnah that says that they're arguing about moving the ladder from one place to another does not follow the Tana of Braisa that says that if they're moving the ladder, everyone agrees you're allowed to because you need it for Yom Tov. And what they're arguing about a ladder that's not specifically made for the Shikub. We're talking about a regular ladder that's used to climb upstairs. So the time the Braisa Amar Shimon says, Moidim Beis Shammai. They both agree. They all agree you couldn't move the ladder from one shavich to the next shavich. You know what the argument is? We'll get to what I just told you about the other ladder in a minute. Their argument is once you achieve what you wanted to achieve, can you bring the ladder back in its original position? Beis Shammai says, "Ein marzinin." Beis Shammai says, "You're not allowed to return it." And Beis Hillel says, "Af marzinin." You can return it. So no, everyone agrees you're allowed to move the ladder because it's quite obvious you're using it to take away the birds. So that one you need to shech. Question is, once you completed the job, can you put the ladders back? The next opinion is Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Bamed v'ori mamurim." And right now we're understanding Rabbi Yehuda is arguing with the Tanna Kama. Bamed v'ori mamurim. When is this said? B'sulun shel shavich, a ladder specifically for the shavich. But a ladder that's meant for upstairs, and everyone agrees that people will think that you're repairing the roof. Their argument is only regarding a ladder from Shavach to Shavach. Now it seems that he's arguing with the Tanna Kama. I mean, the Tanna Kama would hold that the same argument be about a ladder to the roof. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, a ladder to the roof, there's nothing to discuss about. Definitely to us, their whole argument is limited to a ladder on the Shavach. And the Tanna Kama, the machlekes is only about after you finish a job, can you return it? And Rabbi Yehuda is not so clear. As we'll see in a minute. Rabbi Beitza says all you can do is mateya mechaloin lechaloin. Rabbi Beitza says all you can do is move it from one window to the next. You cannot move it from one shavach to another shavach. Others who understood Rabbi Beitza to say that you're allowed to go for it. So that's exactly like Misham and Mishnah. He slightly varies his opinion from Misham and Mishnah because he holds af madadiba. You can move it very slowly from one window to the next window. So you're allowed to move it to one window to the next window, and you're allowed to slowly move it a little bit at a time to the next window. So it's not so obvious what you're doing. That people won't make a mistake. You're trying to repair something. Says more a story regarding this understanding of the Beitza. So it's clearly that the Tana of this Beitza is not like our Mishnah. Because our Mishnah is talking about arguing whether you can move the ladder from one place to another place, and this Tana holds are only arguing whether you can return the ladder from one place to the next. Says about the children enough of the curiosity. They once went out in the villages and they went out to view their fields. Obviously, quite wealthy. Also, they returned. Any shilas came to you while you were traveling there? Yeah, actually, yes. The issue of a ladder came to us about, and the issue was about moving a roof ladder from one shayvah to the next shayvah. The Tanu, and we actually permitted it. We understood that Beis Hillel holds you out. He said, you totally misunderstood, and we'll soon see in a minute what the basis of their error was. So the Isru Mashitar to go back to the villages and tell everyone you made a mistake. Inu Saber, they understood. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda seems to be addressing the Tanakama, and he said, I want you to know when it comes to the roof ladder, everyone agree, or the second story ladder, everyone agrees that you're not allowed to move it. That means the Tanakama holds that they're arguing there as well. And the halach is like Beis Hillel, therefore, according to Beis Hillel, you're allowed to move even the ladder that you used to repair the upstairs or climb upstairs. You're allowed to use it from shayvah to shayvah. So therefore, they rule you're allowed to. So the Miklal the Tanakama Sava Pligi says, you made a mistake. Rabbi Yehuda is not coming to argue the Tanakama, he's coming to explain the Tanakama. Because Tanakama wasn't that clear. You might think Tanakama holds you're allowed to even take the second story ladder and use it from shayvah to shayvah. Rabbi Yehuda time the Tanakama, he's explaining the reason Tanakama. And therefore, he's telling you that Tanakama, when he says that is an argument about returning it, whatever, he's only talking about the shayvach ladder. But everyone agrees that the aliyah ladder, you cannot move it at all because people have misconstrued that you're doing it to repair Marsayin, you're doing it to repair your roof. How do I know that's chat? So Rabbi Chia says this true. How do I know that Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda are both on the same page as far as the aliyah ladder is concerned? And the only difference between them is that the Tanakama holds only arguing about the return, and Rabbi Yehuda holds that they're arguing about the ladder of the shayvach generally. Midiktani, it says, "Melichin es asulam b'shayvach l'shayvach." Rabbi Yehuda says, Tanakama said you can move it from one, you can move it from shayvach from shayvach to shayvach, which is Rav Shimon Elazar. What do you mean mesh shayvach l'shayvach? If we're talking about aliyah, if you tell me you understood the way you understood Tanakama, we're not talking about a specific ladder, even a ladder for the aliyah. You can use and move it to another shayvach. What's the relevance from one shayvach to another shayvach? It's an aliyah ladder. Generally, it's not sitting positioned by a shayvach. It's sitting hooked up to the second floor. It should have said you're allowed to move a shayvach ladder to. You're allowed to move a ladder to the shayvach, and then they would include even the aliyah ladder by saying from one shayvach to another. What's he really saying? This is a shayvach ladder. It's right now positioned by one shayvach. He can take it from there and bring it to another shayvach. If according to you, we're not even talking about a ladder of a shayvach, talking about any ladder, then he should just said you're allowed to bring a ladder to a shayvach on Yom Tov. The fact that he says from one shayvach to another shayvach, clearly we're talking about a shayvach ladder, and even Rav Shimon Elazar, the Tanakama, says. Only then is there an argument Hillel Shami that's permitted, but an aliyah ladder, everyone agrees you're not allowed to because people will misconstrue what the intentions are. And there's Maris Ayin. The Tanakama, which is in our case of Shimon Elazar, definitely shall shayvich in, shall aliyah. Only a shayvich can, and not an aliyah. No, what were the children of Rabbi Chia thinking? The Idach, and they were thinking, Mik Tani, does it say Sulam shall shayvich? If they said to the father, if you were right, that we're talking about a shayvach ladder, it should have said a shayvach ladder, a sulam shel shayvach, a shayvach ladder, you can move to another shayvach. It just says from one shayvach to shayvach. Mishayvach l'shayvach tani. It sounds like afilu l'kama shayvachin. All he's trying to say here is, I don't care what ladder you're using. I'm not only permitting you to move it to one shayvach because you need, for Simchas Yom Tov, you can move it to as many shayvachs as you want, from shon shayvach to no shayvach. But what's the origin of this ladder? Maybe it's the aliyah ladder. So the Chulab Chi understood that even the aliyah ladder that Shimon Elazar holds, that Beis Hillel Meshami arguing whether you can use it or not, Beis Hillel has no problem with it. There's no Marasayin. And but according to Rabbi Chia, no, everyone agrees that the aliyah ladder is Marasayin. They're talking about a shayvach ladder. And Beis Hillel says the shayvach ladder is not Marasayin because everybody can clearly see what the purpose is. That's one version of the story. Ikirami, there's another version of the story. But he asked them, what did you guys talk about? They said to the father, we had a shaila, we know what the shaila was. He too, Sulam Shalia, Boli Adenu, Hitarnu. They took an aliyah ladder already before Yom Tov, and they placed it by the Shavach. So it's different, right? It's already prepared, it's sitting by the Shavach. Everybody can see it's already sitting by the Shavach. And the issue was, can you tilt it down to, I know everyone, let's say, agrees you cannot use an aliyah ladder, but here it was already positioned before Yom Tov by the Shavach, but now you're moving it to a lower window. And we allowed it. We told them, even that you're not allowed to, if it's an aliyah ladder. Why? They thought, they thought, they weren't focusing on Rabbi Yehuda, they were focusing on Abdeisa. Abdeisa said that all you're allowed to do is move it from one window to another window. Tanakama, so he thought, Abdeisa is being lenient. No, but according to Tanakama, if it's an aliyah ladder, the Tanakama is saying we're talking about a Shavach ladder. According to the second version of the children of agree with their father that Tanakama is only talking about a Shavach ladder, but an aliyah ladder is forbidden. And Abdeisa comes along and says you're allowed to move it from window to window. They thought Abdeisa is being lenient, that he's not addressing the Shavach ladder, he's actually addressing just really my pictures now. Okay, he's actually addressing the aliyah ladder, and he's saying that the Tanakam holds the aliyah ladder is totally forbidden. Come on, they said no. The aliyah ladder, if it's prepared before Yom Tov, you can move it from window to window, and that's why they rule is permitted. But they made a mistake. Abdeisa actually being stringent. That even that which the Tanakama is permitting, that means the Shavach ladder itself, but you're allowed to move it. Comes along Abdeisa says no. Even the Shavach ladder, you cannot move from one Shavach to another. He's saying in the Shavach ladder, you can only move it from window to window. So you cannot move it around. You can only move it from window to window, according to the Achedim, move it in incrementally, very slow steps. And the mission continues, you're allowed to move it from window to window. Yeah, so Rishama says you're not allowed to move a ladder from one Shavach to another, but you could move it. Rishama said you could move it from one, within the same Shavach, there were different boxes where the birds were sitting, they're nesting. So therefore you can move it around from one box to another, from one cavity into another cavity. Almost, what do we see generally from Mishnah? Who comes out in this Mishnah stricter? Is Beishamai comes out far stricter. But still very lenient. He said, you need birds for Yom Tov, let's move that ladder from one Shavach to the next Shavach. And Shammai said, no, only within the same Shavach. So who's stricter here? Shammai. The problem is the very first Mishnah here in Masechta Beya, when it came to the egg laid on Yom Tov, or when it came to shechting the Kisei Adam, when it came to shechting, Beishamai said, no, let him go ahead and shecht, and you'll cover the blood, but as long as you have a shovel there already. He said, you're allowed to dig it up, you're allowed to cover the blood, because Simchas Yom Tov is so paramount. And Hill was machmir. So what's going on? They're inconsistent. Says Gemara, Alma, the fact that Beishamai is not allowing you to move it from one Shavach to another, when it comes to matters pertaining to Simcha of Yom Tov, like eating meat, so Beishamai is the one who's stringent. He says, no, this allows it. And it's still Lakula. Let me ask a question from our very first Mishnah. But let me ask a question. Didn't we learn on Yom Tov? Beishamai says, go ahead and dig with a shovel, and you cover it. And Basil said, you shouldn't check. You cannot check unless you had sand prepared before. So the sand is now muktzah, everything is prepared. So we see from there, Beis Hill's, in our first Mishnah, Beis Hill's one who's stringent and doesn't care about Simchas Yom Tov. And Shammai is very concerned about Simchas Yom Tov. And here, when it comes to the ladders, it's all the way around. How's that work? Rabbi Yechon said, you're right. When it comes to this second mission, we just learned, swap the names around. Beis Hill is the one who said you cannot move the ladder around. And Beis Shammai said you could, because Beis Shammai is very concerned about Simchas Yom Tov. Swap the names around. Says how do you know? It's a big chiddush to come along and swap names around in a Mishnah, which everybody had to memorize. You say, what compelled you to swap the names around? The inconsistency. I can explain to you that the two Mishnahs are very different from each other, and therefore there's no inconsistency whatsoever. Then how do you know? Dilma could say as follows. You know why Beis Shammai there is very lenient. You know why not? Maybe he's lenient only because you already had the shovel prepared, and the shovel is sitting inside the sand is sitting on the shovel, and all he was lifting the shovel. So therefore Rabbi Shammai is making. What happened if you didn't have, let's say, a prepared shovel? So then there's an angle that perhaps you're digging on Yom Tov. He would not have allowed it allowed on Yom Tov to do that, even though the sand might be very soft sand, so there's no issues of breaking the sand. It's as if it's already dug up and everything else. So therefore, loy, and the same thing over here. So Bishamay says, if the shovel wasn't prepared and the sand sitting on the shovel, just a question of lifting the shovel, then I would not have allowed it there, and I'm not allowing it here because people are going to misconstrue that the ladder you're using here is to repair the roof. Or I can say, over here is lenient. Over here it's quite obvious that the ladder is specifically used for the shayvik. It's a shayvik ladder, as we said before. And if it's a shayvik ladder, everybody can see that there's no issues, no maras ayin, nothing here. That's why he's so lenient. Abul Hassan over there, in the case of the shovel, he's very concerned about the shovel because maybe he's going to crush some of the dirt, and therefore he bans that shovel, even if it's prepared. And only if you have no choice, then he allows it. Eli Kasha, you're right. There's no inconsistency here, but there might be an inconsistency from a later Mishnah. Hakasha Beshamai says, Lo yitel, you shouldn't take any of the birds. Elim can a neighbor, James, not sufficient just to say, I'm going to take a couple of birds from this cavity. You have to actually touch the birds and shake them to you as if you physically designate these birds. And we'll talk about in the next mission is what happened if the bird you set aside, white birds and black birds came up and so on. And Basil says, it's enough just to stand and say, Noah's Beshila is much more relaxed when it comes to Simchas Yom Tov. Alma Gabe Simchas Yom Tov, when it comes to Simchas Yom Tov, Beshame, Lechumra, Basil, Lekula, Beshame is one of the strict, Basil is lenient. But Aminu, so I have a question from our very Mishnah. Here, Beishamai is strict when it comes to designating the birds. In our Mishnah, we learned that Sheikhet Chayiv B'Yontav Amar Rabbi Yechon Muchlefes Hashita. Rabbi Yechon answers, okay, you're right. There's inconsistency. Here, Beishamai, the first Mishnah is very lenient when it comes to the Yontav, and here Beishamai says, no, not enough to just verbally say, I'm going to take birds from here. You have to physically move them around. And the reason why Beishamai by the birds. So first he says, says, let's swap the names around. And he says again, what compelled you? The logic of Beishamai, why you have to physically take the birds is we're scared that we're talking about the first two birds that you're going to get a hold of. Any birds later on, I'm not worried. And the first two birds, you might then say, you look at the birds, you might say, you have Rahmanos on the birds, you might change your mind. So therefore, just saying it is not enough. But if you physically move them around, you've already showed us you don't have Rahmanos, you plan to actually use them. Again, there's no inconsistency. When Beishamai says in the first mission, he's lenient, the shovel's already prepared, sitting in the sand already all soft inside the shovel. If you have to actually use the shovel, even Shammai will say, no, simply because I won't allow you. And the same thing about the birds. You're scared that you're going to change your mind and you're going to walk away. And therefore you move the birds. No, we're scared on Yom Tov, you're going to start taking the birds which are generally muktzah, and then you look at them and right before you shut them up, I can't do it because you didn't really prepare them before Yom Tov properly. Inami or Ad can like come to Basil. Basil over here Basil is relaxed, keeping the muktzah. The whole problem is that the birds are muktzah. So therefore, it's enough to verbalize and say, "I'm going to use the birds from this cavity. I'll take these birds." Sagi is enough. I will hustle over there. In the case of the digging, it's much more than just muktzah. We're scared that there might be clumps of dirt, and you're going to break it down, and that's k'tisha, that's teichen, grinding. So that's why. So it's not an issue of simchas yom tov. The issue is the problems that might arise. And in our Mishnah, the Basil is much more. The problems are far greater, are more severe. You could be liable on these of the rights, and that's why it's strict. Eli kasha, hakasha. What bothered? The fact that Yechon came along and said, "Let's swap the names in our Mishnah." What bothered him? What forced it? I'll give you another possibility. It says later on, Beishamai says, Oli was a handle of a board that was very, very thick, and they used to use that handle sometimes to break down wheat into half, into thirds, into quarters, into brits, and so on. And it doesn't really have the status of a keli. So he says here on Yom Tov, if you want to use that, let's say to cut the meat or use it somehow implement for meat. So Beishamai says, "Ein noitliness oli." Now I'll take this very thick board and that's normally used to crush wheat and so on and so forth. Because it's a malach isa because you're crushing it. It's meant to do tight with the Shabbos. You're not allowed to do. And so therefore Beishamai says, I'll move it around. Even though even though it's muktzah, if you're using, let's say, a muktzah for a permitted use, let's say a hammer, which is muktzah because it's dedicated to build, but you want to use it as a paperweight, you can. the tzayda gufay. And Beisham doesn't believe that the mukta a klisha malach to lisa the tzayda gufay is permitted. So Beisham says you're not allowed to take this only to katzel labos because damiran besil is matir. Alma what besil allows what we seek about simchas yom to come simchas yom to Beisham lechumra. He's not allowed to use that. And it's a very good implement because it's heavy and you can break the meat down quickly. And besil is lekula. Yet what about our first mission? But let me ask a question. The shit swap the names around. So the Gemara said again, I still don't see the compelling reason why you have to swap the names around. But how do you know? Dilma perhaps is not so. Only over there because there is a decanut because you already have a prepared shovel on the sand sitting there, so there's nothing really wrong. I will like a decanut, but Bishama is also made if you have to use the shovel to sort of dig. I wouldn't allow you because I'm scared you're going to be crushing the sand. So therefore, Beisham has nothing to do with the leniency of Simchas Yom Tov. It's just that there's no real Issa there, no prospect of an Issa. The sand is already there, sitting on the shovel, just lifting it, and it's all broken down. Or Inami, Ad can look at you know why Bisham is lenient over here. They could try to kill up. It's a keli, and therefore it's a klisha malachteli Issa, but you're using a tzera gufa for permitted use. Aval hasam over there, over there, there's no reason why it should be allowed. And if you're scared, you might do an Issa deraisa of crushing the sand. Loy is forbidden. So therefore, we still start. What compelled Rabbi Yochanan to say that our Mishnah about the ladders, let's swap the names around and say Beis Hillel is one who is strict, doesn't allow you to move the ladders about, and Beis Shammai is the one who is lenient, and so on. So we will continue tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem. Should we go